History loves big reasons for war: religion, empire, royal drama. But today's story? Today's story begins with an ear. In 1739, Great Britain and Spain went to war. Thousands would die, fleets would burn, and the Caribbean would turn into a floating graveyard. And the official reason was that a merchant captain walked into the House of Commons, reached into his pocket, and pulled out his own severed ear. Welcome to the War of Jenkins Ear, possibly the most ridiculous casus belli in the history of the British Empire. The Powder Keg Caribbean. To understand why one ear could help start a war, you have to understand the Caribbean in the 1730s. Spain claimed a monopoly on trade in most of the Americas. British merchants, however, were creative. Smuggling wasn't a side hustle, it was the business model. Spain was furious. To protect their monopoly, they licensed Coast Guard ships and privateers to stop, board, and search foreign vessels. In practice, that meant a lot of British captains being harassed, fined, or worse. Tensions were high, tempers were short, and everyone secretly knew a big war was coming. All they needed was a good excuse. The Ear Incident. Enter Robert Jenkins, captain of the British brig Rebecca. In April 1731, his ship was stopped off the coast of Cuba by a Spanish Coast Guard commanded by Juan de Leon Fundino. Fundino accused Jenkins of smuggling. Jenkins denied it. As you might guess, this did not end with a polite customs form. The Spanish seized his cargo. Then Fundino allegedly drew his cutlass and sliced off Jenkins' left ear. According to the story, he told Jenkins, "Take this to your king and tell him that if he were here, I would treat him the same." Jenkins, as any reasonable man would, picked up his ear, put it in a jar of alcohol, and went home. Because if life hands you mutilation, make evidence. He reported the attack. There were protests, outrage, official notes, and then nothing. Britain's government, led by Prime Minister Robert Walpole, wanted peace with Spain and more trade, not a war over a single ear. Political theater. The ear returns. For 7 years, Jenkins and his ear were basically a footnote. Then British domestic politics got involved. By the late 1730s, Walpole's enemies, the so-called Patriot Whigs, wanted two things: more trade with Spanish America and less Walpole. A war could give them both. They needed a story, something simple, emotional, and easy to put in a pamphlet. Enter the Ear Comeback Tour. In 1738, Jenkins was brought before the House of Commons. He allegedly produced his preserved ear and recounted how it was cut off by the Spanish. When asked how he had felt during the attack, one popular version of the story claims he said, "I committed my soul to God and my cause to my country." Whether he actually said that or not, it was perfect propaganda. The public was outraged. Newspapers fanned the flames. And Walpole, the guy who'd spent years trying to avoid war, found himself cornered. In October 1739, Britain declared war on Spain. Officially, it was about trade and honor. Unofficially, it was the Ear War. Old Grog and Porto Bello. The early war had one shining hero, Admiral Edward Vernon. Vernon was one of Walpole's loudest critics. He boasted that he could capture the Spanish port of Porto Bello with just 6 ships. This sounded like pure political trash talk, until he actually did it. November 1739, Vernon attacked Porto Bello with 6 warships and took the place in about 24 hours. In Britain, people went absolutely patriotic. They named a new London street, Porto Bello Road, honor of the victory. And patriotic songs like Rule Britannia emerged in the same wave of British naval chest-thumping. Vernon also left his mark in a much more liquid way. He was nicknamed Old Grog because of the coarse grogram cloak he wore. Annoyed by drunk sailors, he ordered the rum ration to be mixed with water, and sometimes citrus. The sailors called the diluted drink grog. So next time you're sipping a tropical drink, remember, you are, in some small way, toasting a British admiral who was avenging a pickled ear. After Porto Bello, Britain was feeling unstoppable. So Vernon went bigger, much bigger. In 1741, he led what was then the largest amphibious operation in history, until D-Day. Roughly 180 to 190 ships and tens of thousands of soldiers and sailors sailed against the Spanish stronghold of Cartagena de Indias. The British were so sure of victory that they minted commemorative medals before the battle was over, showing the Spanish commander kneeling before Vernon. Unfortunately for them, the Spanish commander was Blas de Lezo, a man who'd already lost an eye, an arm, and a leg in previous battles, and was still better at war than most people with all their limbs. Lezo turned Cartagena into a death trap. He blocked channels with sunken ships, strengthened forts, and forced the British into brutal, narrow assaults. And then the real killer arrived. Tropical disease. Yellow fever, malaria, dysentery. They tore through the crowded British ranks far more efficiently than Spanish guns. By the end, most of the roughly 18,000 British dead or incapacitated were victims of disease, not battle. The Great Armada limped away in defeat. Vernon's glorious victory became an unmentionable humiliation. The British government quietly discouraged talk of Cartagena. It did not fit the heroic narrative they were selling at home. Fade into a bigger war. After Cartagena, the War of Jenkins Ear lost momentum and its identity. It merged into a much larger conflict, the War of the Austrian Succession, which pulled in most of Europe. By the time peace was signed in 1748, the original casus belli, a mutilated captain and his preserved ear, was largely forgotten. British trade hadn't transformed, the Caribbean borders were mostly unchanged, and tens of thousands were dead. The lesson of the ear. The War of Jenkins Ear was never really about an ear. It was about smuggling, trade monopolies, imperial rivalry, and a political opposition desperate for a war, and a weapon against the government. Robert Jenkins' ear was the perfect prop, simple, shocking, and easy to understand. It turned complex economic arguments into a single, unforgettable image. So the next time you hear about a war starting over some outrageous incident, remember, it might not be about the incident at all. Sometimes in politics, a good prop is worth more than 1,000 rational arguments.